All right, we're back on the 2006 Mercury Grand Marquis that we swapped the rear axle, and found a noise. Think it's in the outer axle bearings, so I'm going to drop the diff cover, drain the fluid, pull the center pin, pull the axles out, and see if I can tell exactly where it's coming from before I go get parts. So this is the inside. What we've got to do is this, if I can get it to where you can see, this bolt is bolted into this shaft, which runs down through here. You have to pull this bolt, spin it around, pull this out to be able to shove, get out of the light, this axle shaft in and pull the C-clip off of it. So that's what we're going to do. This is probably not the optimal way to do this, but I've got to get behind that bearing to the outside of the bearing race to be able to pull it out. So I'm going to try to pull the bearing and the seal at the same time, and this is what I've got. But with these on there, it doesn't fit through the hole. So I have to put one in, put the other one in, bolt it in, put the third one in, and bolt it together. So here we go. So this is kind of what happens inside the carrier. This is the spider gear, or the side gear, part of the spider gears, that it slides on. This C-clip slides into that groove, and then when you pull the axle out, it sits inside that end of the spider gear, so it can't physically come out. And that pin that has the bolt through it slides right past this, and this physically contacts that pin in there. So it can't, the axle can't shift up, and this can't pull out. Maybe you can see that good enough. So this side gear has a spline onto the axle. And slide into the carrier. You can see where the C-clip goes right there. So there's plenty of room for it to go on. But when everything's together, this has to ride between there. So there's not enough room. So you have to slide the C-clip on there, push the axle back, and then put the other gears in, slide this through. So the axle shaft actually rides against this pin, so it can't move in and let the C-clip out. it's time for some sealant. This is what I like using. It's Permatex Ultra Black. Here's a little tidbit. Every mechanic probably knows this, but if this is your first time using RTV, you have to puncture the end. Just turn the cap around. So I'm sure everybody has their own way of putting RTV on. What I like to do is put me a bead around and then smear it, making sure it gets on both sides of the bolt hole to where it's kind of level. Doing the same thing on the axle housing, and then letting them tack up just a little bit and putting both of them together. If you've got another way and it works for you, that's the way you need to do it. All right, it's pretty late, close to 11. Got fluid in, gonna let it sit, make sure it doesn't leak. I'll finish buttoning it up next time I'm in the shop, see if it works. So I've already taken this thing for a test drive and there's no noise, but I pulled it out part way and forgot to film. So I'm gonna explain what I did. I pulled it out and left the front tires up in the shop and the back tires off to be able to get a little bit of an angle. And then I went and rechecked the diff fluid and put a little bit more in it. With it at an angle like this, so you can hold a little bit more diff fluid, but it's not a lot more. This plug right here is where the diff fluid goes in, and it has to fill this pumpkin chunk, center axle, whatever you want to call it, where all the gears and everything are. It has to fill it, and it actually has to let fluid run down these axle tubes to get to the bearing that's on this end. So what I did when I jacked the car up was actually raise this up a little bit to be able to allow just a little bit more fluid to make sure that there was enough in the axle. So she's ready to go. All I've got to do is pull her the rest of the way out of the shop, call the guy, get him to come get her.